I'd always wanted to go to University of Michigan. I remember walking to school in the sixth grade. I was probably about 11, 12 years old. I was walking with a bunch of friends, and we were talking about where we were going to go to college. We had no idea what college even meant, but we knew where we were going to go. And most of us actually said University of Michigan. And so I've always wanted to go there. My older sister graduated from there. So, and Ann Arbor is, a wonderful place to be. So it was a great experience for me. Oh yeah, I do. This was the late '60s, and there was a lot of political unrest on campus, and me and my friends were very much a part of that at the time. We were demonstrating, you know, marching to the ROTC building all the time, getting tear gas, getting chased away by the cops, and I was actually there for the very first hash bash. Very first, and it wasn't a big event either. It was about 30 or 40 students and about 10 plainclothes cops that everybody knew were plainclothes cops, and it was interesting. So yeah, those were really interesting and dynamic times to be a student.
What kind of issues were people active?
I mean, it was all about the Vietnam War, really. It was it was viewed as a terribly unjust, stupid war to be in, and we were all getting drafted. So at that time, they changed to a lottery system for drafts. So up until then, you could get a student deferment. So all the privileged kids in the country weren't getting drafted; they were going to college. And then they changed that to a lottery system. So based on your birthday, and they just did a big lottery system and threw like balls out of a bin, and you were either lucky or unlucky. My number happened to be 88, so I was pretty unlucky. So I was kind of destined to go, and I even had to go take a physical. But then the war ended just in time for me. But all through those years, that was the main issue of political activism. There were some peripheral issues, but that was really it. I wanted to work with kids, so that's why I wanted to go into education. And I had experience working with kids in summer camps, things like that. So that's why I went into education. So I never really changed my major at all. I ended up never teaching. I went into, actually got a master's degree in social work and did that was a therapist for 10 years, and then after that I went into financial planning, which I've been doing for the last 30 years. So I kind of had a circuitous route to get me where I am. But graduating from Michigan is a big deal. I've never had, in any interview that I did, I don't believe, had anybody ask for my transcripts. And back then they probably didn't even search for transcripts. Back then they didn't do any background checks, But just telling people, and having it on my resume, I think was a major a benefit.
Yeah.
It's funny, but here this was probably 1970 maybe, okay? In the midst of just tremendous political upheaval, throughout the country. I mean, because you had those of us who, long hair and beards, people now think of the name hippies. We never thought of ourselves as hippies, because hippies was a real kind of, let's just hang out and do nothing kind of attitude, while we were all politically active. So a hippie was more or less an offensive term to, if somebody thought we were hippies, we would, completely disagree with that. But we looked like it. I had hair out to here, I had a beard out to here, wearing nasty looking clothes. But I had and I had some teachers who were really avant-garde and way out there. I had a education professor who basically for the final, he said, just tell me the grade you want and justify it. So I put A, and I put why not? And he thought that was profound enough to give me an A in the class. I mean, that's the kind of atmosphere it was. I mean, it's stupid, right? But I had this class, this poetry class, and it was an old professor you know, kind of white hair on the fringes, bald down the top. And all sorts of people, you know, people like me in the class, straight people in the class, fraternity kind of people in the class, you know. It was probably a requirement, you know, an English requirement. And this guy was really old, and he was just dedicated to teaching poetry. And I had no terrible interest in poetry, but he was the best. I don't even remember his name, but he was the best teacher. It didn't matter that it was 1970. It didn't matter that there was political activism. He was going to teach his class, and he treated everybody the same. He called everybody Mr. or Miss, and you know, I just loved that class, and I had great respect for him, and really enjoyed reading the poetry and learning it through him. So it was a great experience for me. That I can say on camera, you know. One of the greatest experiences we had, my friends and I, this has nothing to do with school. It was an Ann Arbor experience, and we were going to a concert that night. And I think the concert was a band called Mountain, which is, you should check them out. They got some great songs on some of their features, so you'd like it. Hard rock and roll. And we didn't have any pot to smoke, okay? So it's like, oh geez, you know. So we did have this old bag of stuff. We don't know how old it was. So we figured, okay, let's bake it, put it in brownies, and eat it. So we didn't know what we were doing, right? We didn't grind it up. We just put it in this brownie mix, baked it, and ate it. It was like eating hay. It was horrible, you know. And so it was hours and hours, and we're like, are you high yet? No, are you? No, I don't think so. Maybe, you know. And then all of a sudden, like 2 hours later, boom, it hit. And we had the greatest time at this concert. And so that was one of my great memories of an incident or occasion at Michigan. You know, I don't know if it's politically correct or not, but that's the way it was.
That's what the atmosphere was at campus.
Oh yeah, I mean, you would go to Hill Auditorium to watch a concert, and you know, everybody would be smoking joints in the auditorium and throwing frisbees and beach balls around and stuff like that. Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I mean, you know, the university is and was a much more liberal place to be than the society at large. So, you know, so there were people there, the fraternity people, you know, who were preppy kind of people, you know, and I think they looked at us like we were disgusting, and we looked at them like they were disgusting, you know. And then you had kind of just like the nerds, you know. Today they'd be, you know, brilliant computer people. Back then they were just engineering geeks kind of thing, you know. And then you had us, and there were a lot of us back then.
Yeah.
You know. Well, I mean, it was really a very pivotal time in my life in forming who I became and who I was at the time. You know, I think if I hadn't gone there or had gone to a different school, I would have probably had different attitudes about all those issues that I was describing earlier. And so, you know, it really shaped my worldview just by being there for a long time. I'm not near that kind of person anymore in terms of my attitudes, but I still retain a core of who I am, you know, from those days. So I guess that's wrong. I am the same person, but my attitudes and views and beliefs have changed, as I would hope happens to most people as they evolve and grow. But yeah, no, it was a tremendous influence on who I am now and who I became to be. You know, over the past few decades, I mean, I lived through an amazing time of change in Detroit. I was there in high school when the 1967 riots occurred, which is really the beginning of the white flight, the serious white flight. Actually, there was some white flight earlier than that, but then it just took off like crazy after the riots. And I was there during, I experienced the riots, what it was like. We had curfews, you had tanks rolling down the streets, you could see fires from downtown. My friends and I actually got kind of trapped downtown during the riots because we were complete idiots, but it happened. And so the changes have been tremendous, and you just saw the whole decimation of Detroit. I mean, it just completely dissolved. When I was a kid, we could ride our bikes all the way downtown. It was like a 10, 15-mile ride, and we would do it and go to Belle Isle, and we could do that without getting beat up or killed. Then after, there was quite a time when you couldn't do that. You wouldn't do that, and then you had the recession of 2008, which just kind of was the frosting on the cake and just took whatever there was completely away. I mean, the city was in tremendous decline before that anyways. But, and now you're seeing this tremendous rebirth. It's really an amazing story. It's never going to be like it was just because the population is so much less. You're never going to, I don't think you're ever going to get that level of population back in the city. But now you have young people who want to live there, and you have industry that's moving in and providing jobs. And Detroit is seen, you got Shinola. Shinola is a great example of kind of this hip company, where hip people, we took a tour of Shinola. There's a guy who works here who's former fraternity brother of my son from U of M. And he works at Shinola, so he got us a tour. And you got people working there who normally would be working in Silicon Valley, or in Portland, Oregon. Young, hip, smart people. So Detroit is kind of so out it's in now, and it's now getting this cachet and a kind of a national reputation. But more important, the city is better today than it's been in 30 years. Oh, it's just, food, restaurants, great places to go. It really does have, I think, some of the best variety of good food, in the country. There's fabulous restaurants all over, obviously. But the Tigers, Lions, we go down there for sporting events. Great town's great, and the city's just, it's got some life today that it didn't have before, which is exciting.
Yeah. So did your love of Detroit influence the reason why you kind of stayed in the area?
That's an interesting question, because I wanted to get out of Detroit. Just not because of anything about Detroit, I just wanted to experience different things. So when I graduated graduate school, I got my master's degree in social work from Wayne State. I somehow got it in my head that I wanted to go to Philadelphia. I don't know why. It was the East Coast. It wasn't New York. I thought it'd be cool. So I submitted about 30 resumes to different jobs in Philadelphia. Didn't get a sniff. I don't know why. For whatever reason. Probably if I had gone there and started applying, it might have been different. So nothing happened, and I just ended up, kind of getting a job here and staying. So it wasn't that I did want to get away, not because of anything negative, more because I wanted to be in a new, different environment. Didn't work out. I have good close friends who not only did we all live together in Michigan when we were students, we also went to high school and grade school together. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, out of the four of us, two of them are now living in Northern California, and one of them's living in Amherst, Massachusetts. So I'm kind of the one who stayed behind. Yeah. But we have an annual golf outing reunion, which is coming up in 2 weeks, and they come back to Ann Arbor. We stay in Ann Arbor, we play golf in Ann Arbor, and hang out, go to different places and take cruises of the houses that we used to live in. It's kind of a great reminiscing reunion. I think I've pretty much said it all. I'm thankful today. You talk about diversity. When I grew up in Detroit and went to high school, the high school that I graduated from was about 70% black kids and about 30% white kids. It was during that big transition. So to me, that was another great formative experience for me to be around black kids every day, be in their culture rather than them be in my culture. And that was a fabulous experience. The truth was, when I graduated, when I went into high school, back then we went into the 10th grade, I was fearful, about going to my high school, which was Mumford High School, because I had heard about racial tensions. And I ended up actually going to Cass Tech downtown for a year, and left there before they could throw me out. And then I went to Mumford, my local school, and just loved it. Had a great time, and it was so. And again, it was a wonderful experience that's really shaped the way I look at the world and the way I look at people. Just growing up and being a part of that high school experience, and then going to Michigan, to Ann Arbor. Again, it was, it was a fabulous time. The problem is when you go through fabulous times, you don't know they're fabulous until after. So and we were filled with the same anxiety. I don't know if it's the same, but anxiety and angst about our future and about the world and about society back then. And now looking back on it, I'm just so grateful that I had that experience and was able to go to school there, and that it's become such a big part of my life.
Yeah, so our last question, do you have advice then for future U of M students?
It's such a different world today. The kids, so many kids I think that are going to school are so much smarter and so much more driven than we were. I just finished, for the past 2 years, I was president of the University of Michigan Alumni Club of Greater Northville. And we give scholarships to kids, not big ones, small ones, but we give them. It's the best we can do. And these applications, we get 60 applications for 8 scholarships, sometimes 70 applications. And these kids, you look at their resumes and their grades, and they're all a mix of Albert Einstein and Mother Teresa. It's just amazing. I don't know how they have time to eat breakfast. They're going to Kenya building hospitals and getting 4.3s and 30s and 35s on their ACTs. So it's crazy. So I guess my advice would be try to take some courses that have absolutely nothing to do with your major or where you think you're going to end up, and get involved as a participant or volunteer in different aspects of campus life, and experience the diversity to make you a well-rounded person, because I think that's the value, the true value of being in Ann Arbor.